Okay, recording has started. So let's start. Now, we have talked about in our last lecture about the effects of taxation. The overview. Now, when we talk about characteristics of a tax system, fairness plays a critical criteria. That the tax system should be fair. And if you remember from the theoretical understanding of different tax systems and efficiency of a tax scheme, we have tried to equate two things. Either the marginal benefit to the tax share or the total benefit to the total tax that I pay. So there is a connection between what I receive and what I get. What I receive and what I pay. Right. So that type of fairness should, or the type of concept of fairness should percolate while designing the tax system in practical life. Right. And there are two types of equity, we will say, uh, to concepts of fairness which have been implemented when we talk about designing tax structure. The first is what we call a horizontal. Now, what is a horizontal? Take for example, there are two groups of people. One is a poor group and is a rich group. Now, the horizontal equity will say that all the poor should be treated in the same way and all the rich should be treated in the same way, right? So, if you discriminate taxes on the basis of, say, some race or color of the skin or the caste of the person or the religion of a person, that will be inequitable but in a horizontal. So, uh, there is an example of it, and I'm taking it from the textbook itself. Okay. Now, the example which is being given is a very nice example. It talks about a twin. Okay. And these twins are exactly similar in all the respects, except for one criteria that one of the twins like chocolate ice creams, the other ones the vanilla. And we assume, let's assume that you just buy those ice cream cups, so the chocolate and vanilla ice cream cups cost exactly the same. So, how would it be if you tax the vanilla and the chocolate ice creams at different rates? Because you are treating just two people from the same cohort in different ways. The moment you increase, suppose you have a higher tax on chocolate ice creams and lower on vanilla, you're discriminating one twin, one of the twins, from the other by taking away more from him because he just likes chocolate ice cream. So this is not to be practiced. That's the idea of horizontality. The idea of vertical equity is the people in the economic ladder, in their economic condition, in their financial condition. Here you have people who are in a position who can afford to pay higher tax because they are higher up in that ladder. And there will be people who will not be in the same position. So the idea of vertical equity is those who are able to pay higher taxes should pay higher tax. So in general, if you look like income of a person, so far we have not brought that concept that whether I'm taxing only income. Because the example of horizontal equity that I gave is an indirect tax on commodity tax, tax on chocolate ice cream and tax on packaging. But in general, across the world, all the governments impose some tax on the income of the people. So it's one of the most common uh, tax structure is the income. Now, you can think of this vertical equity with income as the basis of taxation, right? Now, I am taxing income. So if I look at the horizontal equity part, so all the people, say suppose you have the income data of the citizens of the country or the taxpayers of the country. Not all will be taxpayers, not all citizens will be taxpayers, but I'm talking about the taxpayers, the eligible taxpayers of the country. And you suppose rank them and as well as club them according in an ascending or a descending manner. So the common way is like uh, the 10th percentile, 20th percentile, that of cutoffs are there, right? So you create cohorts. And the horizontal equity will say that those lying in the same income group should face the same income tax rate. And in India, we have seen that is the how anyone, whatever he does, if his or her income is below, say, 2.5 lakhs per annum, is not required to pay any tax. 2.5 to 5 lakhs a year, or 5% of. That is the cohort I am saying, and that is the horizontal issue. Also, though, as the cohorts are increasing in their income range, so those who lie within the 2.5 to 5 lakh bracket, and then I'm comparing the people who lie in the 20 to 25 lakh bracket. Those in that upper cohort is higher tax because the idea is if you earn more, you will be able to pay higher taxes as compared to those who earn less. Now, you cannot have, look, in all practical implementability issues coming in, then it is not possible to have a tax rate for each income number. So suppose someone earns 2,66,731 and you put a tax rate 5.0012. And then the one who earns 2,66,849 should pay a tax rate 5.0021. You cannot have that. It is theoretically possible, but practically it's not possible. And that is why we talk about cohorts. And that is what we call the income bracket. The only thing I should mention here, while from this module onwards, that whenever we talk about practically the official tax structure, the book which is being referred to, you'll find that most of the examples are from previous economics. But if you listen to the lecture, you'll find that most of the examples I give correlated to the Indian economy. The US tax structure and Indian tax structures are different. Not theoretical, but see the income brackets are different. The tax rates are different. So take for example, in India, we always follow progressive taxation. I am a little not very sure about the tax structure and the brackets which started from 2021, which is the new tax structure which came up in last year only. I will always that is available in Google if you just look at it. And there is a comparison also like old regime vis-a-vis new regime. But what I remember about the old regime, because I paid so many times taxes based on that old regime since till 2020, so 0.2.5 lakh per annum. Whenever we say some amount, it's per annum. Tax is calculated in India on a per annum. And when we talk about that, the brackets are initially 0 to 2.5 lakh. And the corresponding tax rate is 0. And that's what we call the tax exempted group. 2.5 to 5 lakh. That was another second bracket, or you can say the second cohort. And the tax slab was, or the rate was 5%. Now, 5 to 10 was 10%. 10 to 15 was 15%, 15 to 20, and something of that sort. 15 onwards, it was almost like 30%. So, anyone who works in India, earns in India, in Indian rupee, because there are Indians who work in India but they earn in dollars. Possible. You work with certain embassy and your income is in dollars. Then that is tax exempt. Union of India can tax a person only if he or she earns in Indian rupee. Okay. Now, if I earn in India in Indian rupee, in general, if you earn around 1.5 lakhs a month, always remember 30% of it is tax. The income itself, forget about all the other indirect taxes that we pay on our regular life. Now, the progressive part of it is cohort based, as I just mentioned. And the horizontal equity, absolutely done. Because I am treating everyone in the same group with the same percentage. But look, even within that cohort, there is a vertical. Why? Because I say anyone earning between 2.5 lakhs to 5 lakhs has to give 5% as tax. So the person who earns 2.5 lakhs plus 1 rupee pays how much? Because the first 2.5 lakhs is exempted. So you pay 5% of 1 rupee as your tax. The person who earns 5 lakhs, he pays 5% of 2.5 lakhs. So for every rupee, you add 5 paisa. So even within the cohort, there is a vertical equity because it's a tax rate which is fixed, not a tax share. Okay. And predominantly across the globe, income is considered as the major basis of taxation. Now, there is one thing, consumption. If you say consumption is the basis of taxation, basically, what will have? Basically, you look at your income. What is your income? Consumption plus savings, right? So, basically, instead of taxing the income, here what you are putting? You are putting the tax on what? Here you are putting the tax on consumption, which implies S is not taxed. The savings of a person are not taxed. There is a third basis economists propose. Use lifetime income as the basis of taxation. And basically, if you remember from your macroeconomics, consumption function, there was something called, remember, life cycle hypothesis. And basically, based on that idea, that a particular person starts his life with some consumption, earns a low earning or high earning or zero earning within different years of his existence. You should have a lifetime income. Somehow you have to calculate the lifetime income of a person and use that as the basis of taxation. So basically, remember when I said that micro foundation of macro, that C1 plus C2 divided by 1 plus R should be equal to I1 plus I2 divided by 1 plus R. So you can borrow, you can repay, and this is exactly what we call the overlapping generation model. And when I say C2 divided by 1 plus R, what does that mean? Suppose I live for two periods, period 1 and period 2. That's my lifetime. So I make the decision of consumption in period 1, keeping not only I1, which is income in period 1 in mind, but also I2, C2, and the rate with which I will discount future value. That's what we call the present discounted value, ED. So if I can do one thing, because Y is equal to C plus S, income is equal to consumption plus S. Now, I can consume more than I earn if I have a possibility of borrowing. So savings will be negative. So Y equal to C plus S, but the S value is negative. That means I have borrowed, or I can save. So S value is positive. So the value of S can be 0 because I1 equal to C1. Then savings in the period 1 is 0. Or I have saved something positive or I have borrowed something negative. So the question is, when I'm talking about lifetime income, then I must put that in the multi-period structure because, and that should be definite. Why definite? Because a person will not live and earn and consume infinitely. For all infinite periods, that's not possible. And now you're saying, suppose that person lives for nth number of years. Then I should have C1, C2, dot, 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 Cn. And similarly, I1, I2, dot, 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 In. And the discounts will be first one. So C2 by 1 plus R, C3 divided by 1 plus R whole square. And that's how it will go. Or if you use a different discounting, R by 1 plus R. Depends on the discount factor also. How you are using the discount or how you're calculating the or discounting the future. So the question is, suppose I have borrowed and consumed more. Which one are you going to tax? My income or my consumption? Because if when I use consumption as the basis of my taxation, I'm exempting my savings. And that was also in the Indian tax structure up to a certain level. If you save, and in India, that saving, as you remember, or you must know, or someone must know, there are different sections of savings called 80C, 80CC, 80D, 80G. These are the sections of the income tax schedule. Suppose when you go for a job in the private sector, there will be something of a component called provident fund. And the provident fund is a government thing, owned, controlled by EPFO, Employee Provident Fund Organization. Similarly, you might have PPF, Public Provident Fund, which are operated by different commercial banks, nationalized banks, also private banks. So commercial bank. You can have the new pension scheme or the NPS structure, like we employees of IIT face. What is that? A part of your income is saved at the source for your pension benefit. And what is the idea? 10% of your basic salary will be paid by from your uh, income, and 10% will be provided by the employer. And when you get your cost to company thing break up, you will find they will calculate both these components, multiply it into 12 for a particular year, and that will be a component in your C2C. Okay. Now, the question is this part out of this. So, suppose you save 10% of your income, which gets locked in, or you go for a public provident fund, which is voluntary. You can do it, you might not do it. Or you save in some mutual fund, or you go for a fixed deposit. Just remember, it should be the stop period or the hold period of that asset should be at least 5 years. So you do not take that money out, or you cannot take that money out before 5 years. So whenever you have saved the money for 5 years, up to 2.5 lakh, that is tax exempted. So savings tax exempted. That part is also, though income is our basis of taxation, but a portion of your savings get exemption from tax is also there. How do you get it? And this is exactly the reason you have ITR filing. You are getting a salary with tax deducted at source. So income is being taxed. Suppose you are in a bracket, 20% of your income is taxed. not entire, because for suppose you earn something around 15 lakhs a annum. Suppose first 2.5 lakhs is tax exempted. So these slabs, even within your income, they will calculate these slabs. 2.5 to 5%, 5 to 7.5, 7.5%. At that sort, the new tax structure has come. Right? So only the salary component which is over and above 15 lakhs. So suppose you earn 25 lakhs an annum. So the last 10 lakhs, so 15 to 25, that will be the under the 30% bracket. Now the question is, I have already paid tax on the basis of an income which has been deducted through the TDS system. So how come tax savings is not taxed? Because no one knows whether I will save or not. I might consume, I might not save, I might save a lot. That is when you file your tax returns. When you file your tax returns, there you show clearly with evidence, give the evidence of your saving, and you get the refund. Okay, so both consumption and income has been somehow incorporated in the Indian tax structure. One, horizontal equity is there. Two, vertical equity is there. Not only vertical equity is there, within every bracket, income bracket, there is a vertical. And also across the brackets, there is a vertical. Income is the basic source of taxation, but also there is a provision of tax exemption on your sale. All these criteria are there in the Indian tax structure. Now the question is, when you talk about the lifetime income or the basis of taxation, then the question is, I exactly do not know which one to tax. Because I'm talking, suppose in the very simplest form, C1 plus C2 by 1 plus R should be equal to I1 plus I2 divided by 1 plus R, right? Now, as I have said, C1 can be equal to, greater than, or less than I1. Because of overlapping generation, what will happen? There's a possibility that you can borrow. And the question is, which one to take? Second, more important part, I am asking you to pay a tax based on your lifetime income. When shall I impose that tax? At the end, at the beginning, at the middle, or if I put it every year, then what is the problem with the existing income or consumption tax? Moreover, suppose I save. If I save, then I have interest income. What about that interest income? Right? The next thing that we should think about, that there are actually criticisms of this income as a basis of taxation. Okay. The idea is, when you are talking about income, uh, mm, particularly with income, there is a problem. Suppose me and you both have the same salary. We have both, suppose we both earn exactly the same monthly salary or the same annual salary. Take, for example, those who work in the government sector or the public sector, like us. Contingent upon the date of joining, all of our salaries are equal. So me and another professor in chemical engineering will get exactly the same salary. Be dependent, contingent upon the date of our joining. right? Or at the same level, a secretary in the Ministry of Commerce and a secretary in the Ministry of Defense will get the same salary. Or the member of parliament from Jammu and the member of parliament from Nagaland will get the same salary. Depending on the seniority. That's why I mentioned depending on the date of your joining the duty, the starting point of your duty. Now the question is, you might have very old parents with sufficient medical expenditure and all of your other family members are dependent on you. So you are the sole earning member of your family. On the contrary, suppose my father has a pension or is in a business, also earns, and in a nutshell, I am not the sole earning member of my family. So am I treating is the or does the tax structure there treats you and me similarly? No. It only talks about income. It does not say anything about the liability of a person. So even when a particular person who has say 5 or 6 dependents has to pay the same tax to another person, suppose who has no dependent. So this has been one of the major criticisms of taxation, income taxation. Basically, you're talking about your ability to pay when you're talking about vertical equality, but you're not considering the well-being of that individual. So there is a different approach to it called the benefit approach. The benefit approach is something that we talked about earlier, that take for example, you should pay exactly for what you get. Why do we pay taxes? I'm not going back to that debate on why should we pay for public goods. We have spent almost like more than half of our course on that discussion. Now, the benefit approach tells you what? It talks about that equity efficiency trade-off, efficiency versus equity. We do pay benefit taxes. Take for example, highway tolls. Only if I use the highway, I have to pay that toll. Right? So we do. Now there are basically certain alternative basis of taxation. Uh, you consider the health condition. Take for example, individual who has some health ailment and has say a monthly income of 10,000 rupees is should be treated completely differently from another person earning 10,000 rupees but who is absolutely fit and fair. Okay, so there can be or there is a requirement for some alternative basis of taxation if I want to incorporate the term fairness in the truest way. Now, when we talk about the general framework which should be adopted while designing a tax scheme or a tax structure, basic focus first comes on Pareto. And remember that Pareto efficiency can be looked into from different angles. The first is the Samuelson condition. That marginal benefit should be equated to my tax structure. From an individual perspective and from the macro perspective, summation of marginal benefit should be equated to the tax rate. Should be equal to 1 or the marginal rate of transformation of public to private. Right? When we talk about efficiency, we are basically assuming a competitive structure. Second is the utilitarianism. What is utilitarianism? Do you remember? I told you before. We talked about it. Anyway, so the idea is the idea of progression. That higher taxes or higher tax rate should be imposed on the rich as compared to the poor. But over and above that, the taxes should be designed in such a way the marginal utility of income. Income is why I'm talking about income, because you're taxing the income and you are taking away part of your income. So the marginal utility of income should be same across all. Basically, if you take away as in the form of tax, say $1 away from all the people in a particular cohort, then the marginal benefit, in this case, the marginal loss or marginal disutility should be same across all them. So basically, what do we require then? We require a particular ratio, the change in utility, del u by u, when you take away a part of the income, divided by change in the revenue. That should be the same across all the people. And that's what the utility is. And you should remember there is also another view, which is the Rawlsian view, the Rawls criteria based view, which is tax system should be such that the poorest section of the society should be better off. Instead of Pareto condition, we focus only on the poor, such that whatever tax is collected should be redistributed to the poorest section of the society, because Rawls improvement can happen. Unlike Pareto improvement, Rawls improvement can happen if, irrespective of what happens to the other people, the society is better off only and only if the poorest person is better off. So basically, the focus changes these three. The Pareto efficient system has a core focus on efficiency. The Rawls system has a core focus on equity. The utilitarianism is somewhere is a mix between both. And that is why this transition from Pareto efficiency to utilitarianism to the Rawls. Okay. So this is the first thing we should talk about when we talk about tax. The next thing that we should start talking about is, now I understand that okay, we can tax income. We can have either of the Pareto rules, utilitarianism, whichever the contingent upon the uh, um, psychology or the philosophy of the designer of the tax scheme, which is the government. And also you can understand the different requirements and effects of a tax. But the more important question that we should ask now, the next most important question, is suppose a new tax is imposed. Uh, because the government of India has faced so much expenditure on grounds of fighting the COVID medical expenditures, the government needs some money. And to have that money, suppose a COVID tax is being imposed. The question is who pays? Income tax is something which is very, very clear. There is no confusion about that this is exactly what we call the incidence of a tax. But completely clear who pays the tax. The person who earns the income pays the tax. But when you talk about this COVID tax, can anyone tell me in this classroom what I'm saying right now? COVID tax is not there, sure, but something is there. Something has happened to generate more revenue for both center and the state governments for this pandemic over the last 1.5 years. Can anyone tell me?
So donations to the PM Cares Fund.
That is not tax. Tax is something, remember. Okay, let me also say, remember I said 80C, 80D, 80G, these are the subsections of the different components of savings under which you can get tax exemptions. In fact, there is this particular 80G is basically donation. If I donate something in the PM Cares, or say you donate something in Bharat Seva, Bharat Sevashram, or you donate something to say some arcane structure, or maybe for Ram Mandir construction, or maybe some masjid construction somewhere. Those donations are tax exempted, and that is under 80G. But donations are tax, not taxes. You might choose to donate in PM Cares Fund, you might choose not to. Forget about your ability. You might think that I will not deposit the money in PM Cares, but I will deposit the money to the local hospital. That local hospital, which is providing vaccination, is running out of syringes, so I'll purchase the syringes for them. But the tax is something which you cannot avoid. So the question is where? Not in, again, I'm telling you, not anything in the name of COVID, not directly, but that particular. I'll also give you an example, a hint also. Increasing a particular tax rate.
Petrol.
Mm, petrol prices and alcohol. That's exactly the two tax rates which are. Do you know why it was possible? And you will understand at the end of this module. Because alcohol and petrol both are beyond the ambit of the GST. These goods are not included in the GST profile. There are four commodities which are not under GST in India: alcohol and petrol. That is why the tax rates can be tweaked. And whenever you buy a petrol, you don't get a GST invoice. What is a GST invoice? Take, for example, whenever you purchase anything from Amazon, you see there is a CGST and there is a SGST. Central component, state component. And now, petrol, if you remember, 7 or 10 days back, there was actually a meeting headed by Nirmala Sitharaman and our uh, finance minister. And no, it should be a little back, a little more in the past, uh, maybe 3, 4 months back. There was I'll say, look back into the decision of bringing petrol within GST. Because of these rising petrol prices and LPG prices, there was a very huge noise everywhere. Because all the prices go up, right? If petrol prices go up, everything goes up. Because of this inflationary situation, which is lurking in near future, they thought, okay, let's bring petrol into GST, but actually that did not materialize. And now even diesel has crossed 100 rupees a liter across the country, across all the states. Now the question is, whenever I introduce a tax like this, there is a distinction or a difference between the concept of legally on whom it is levied and practically who bears the burden of the tax. Look, when we talk about tax burden or a burden of the tax, it is the income effect. A person's real income before and after the tax. That difference is the burden of that tax. Now I have mentioned one thing, taking full account of how wages and prices may have adjusted. Take for example, when I talk about say a corporate tax. If corporate tax is being increased, you can look into that from two perspectives. One, the corporation produces, suppose I'm imposing a tax on a private part. That's corporate tax, right? And it produces a good. Now it can either increase the MRP of its output or it might reduce the wage or benefits of the employees. Either you increase the price or you reduce the cost, because that will be the profit maximizing motive of the firm. That is why I'm not going into the details of it right now. That we'll do tomorrow. That is why this phrase, that taking full account of how wages and prices may happen. So what we need to now understand, what is the incidence of a tax? Take for example, if a tax on a private farm is increased and the farm has done nothing but increase the price of its output by the amount of the same amount of the tax. The tax was supposed to be imposed on the farm, but who pays the tax? The consumers of the final output. So the tax burden has shifted from the originally devised target of the tax, which is the farm, to the consumers who consume or purchase the output of the farm. So basically, what do I mean by the incidence of tax? And who finally bears the burden of the tax? That is the next thing, next important thing we should understand. So I will stop here today. But what I will do, I wanted to complete at least this part because you can understand that I have spent like 40 minutes on one slide talking about the fairness criteria and another 15 minutes on this first slide. I wanted to have this uh, detailed discussion on these two before I wanted to share. So what I will do today, I will share this entire slide. Look, I am on the first slide and there are 38 slides. So what I will do, I'll share this slide with you today, right now. Have a look so that it will be easier or faster for us for completing the entire thing tomorrow. Okay, so I will stop here now. And before I leave and the recording is stopped, that Google spreadsheet is still incomplete. Now look, I have declared the date long back. I have reiterated the modalities and I've given you specific dates for your presentation. The more time you take to form the group, the less time you all of you will get to prepare for the presentation. So please update. I am saying to each and every one of you, all 60 of you present right now, to all of you, I'm saying, uh, Kaustuf has shared a Google spreadsheet. Immediately fill it up. I will look into that Google spreadsheet today exactly at 5. If I feel, if I find any gap, I will fill it up myself. And then there will be no change. 14 groups, 6 members each, and still number of groups does not have more than 2 members. I do have the entire list. I'll randomly choose the number, the people who are whose names are not there in the Google spreadsheet. I'll put it there myself. You have 5 o'clock till today to fill it up. And I will not enter any request after 5 o'clock that don't want to be a part of this group. Please take me to another group. Please fill up that Google spreadsheet by Kaustuf by 5 o'clock today. Okay. So that's all I wanted to say today. Please tell me if you have any doubt or anything that we can talk about. Okay, then let me stop the recording.